The political divisions in our country have never been sharper. News reports, talk shows, and the political discourse on college campuses have never been more heated. What's behind it all? What's driving all the division? The answer might not be what you think. We'll explain what is really going on in today's edition of End of the Age. So, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think it is? I mean, have you ever seen a time when the disagreements were so pointed, the arguments were so loud? Have you ever, do you see what is going on? What's driving all this? I had occasion recently to look at some votes where our Congress passed things by huge majorities. Now, everything is passed by a one-vote majority if we're lucky, if we pass anything at all. The divisions have suddenly become so well defined. So what I want to talk to you about today is what's really driving this. I'm not sure that the average person really knows at this particular time what is driving it. So let's talk about it. And I'm going to ask for your input before we're finished today. So when we look at the Republicans and Democrats that are against Donald Trump, now not all Republicans are, of course. Many of them are for him. But there are still Republicans, some people call them rhinos, Republicans in name only. And they, on critical issues, vote with the Democrats, or at least they block votes so that the Republican agenda does not get through. What's it really all about? I think it was revealed in the Republican debate back during the 2016 presidential election. I was listening to 17 Republicans there on the podium, and I had two or three of them that I liked pretty well. But then there was Donald Trump, who I did not know. I'd never paid any attention to him. I was not involved in the world of Hollywood, and he was sort of in that set. But when he began to speak against globalism, my ears perked up because I knew a lot about globalism. I knew that many politicians today and many world leaders had decided that the nation-state system of government was obsolete and that it was responsible for most wars. They believed that we needed to get rid of the states and move into a system of global governance. Now, I'm not talking about unimportant people believing this. I'm talking about people like Barack Obama, like Bill Clinton, like Hillary Clinton, and the Bushes, especially George Bush Sr. and maybe Jr., I'm not certain about him. Nevertheless, we're talking about big, big players. They were all of the opinion that we had to move away from the nation-state structure of the world and move to a system of world government. Now, once the Berlin Wall fell, we began to hear all about globalization. And you know, they launched these words and they get everybody to repeat them, especially when they have the news media in their pocket. And they keep saying these. We must now all think globally. And it's time for globalization. And we repeated these words and nobody really knew what they meant. Now, globalization simply means the process of globalizing the world, of moving from the nation-state structure of the world to a system of global government. So that's what's been going on. Well, when Donald Trump came along and began to speak against globalism, many of these people have been working toward this for almost 100 years. I mean, this effort toward one world government, it was launched in America way back in the early times. It was amazing exactly what was going on. So all I'm telling you is that's where we stood. That's what was going on at this present time. So it's important for us to understand, and you need to understand, we all need to understand what in fact is going on right now. So is that what these arguments are about? Are they teaching socialism on the college campuses? And is that the reason that any conservative speaker just isn't allowed on the campus? Is that the reason why the demonstrations come out? And is that the reason why you can't even you can't even have an open discussion if you're a student? If you say certain things, I mean, the reaction against you is so heated that a lot of people just keep their mouth shut. So has globalism and the belief in one world government so infected us that they're trying to stifle all freedom of speech? Now, the fact is, that is what is really going on right now. And you and I need to realize it. So does that mean that Karl Marx has won the argument? Because he's the father of socialism. He wrote the Communist Manifesto. So are we really watching the socialization of the world? If so, how's it going to turn out?
Many Christians admit end-time Bible prophecy is very complex and difficult to understand, and for some, a little bit scary. But what if you could understand Bible prophecy? What if you could know what will happen and how the United States will play a key role during end-time events? When you call today and get Understanding the End Time DVD curriculum, you can have peace about what is to come, while understanding the prophetic events that appear in our headlines every day. When you call or go online to endtime.com and order, you'll learn the answer to the biggest prophecy question of all. Will the rapture take place, and when will it happen? This 14-part DVD series is the definitive end-time prophecy Bible study available. And for this limited time, you can get it for just $149. Don't miss this special offer. Understanding the End Time. Call now. 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-END-TIME. Or go to endtime.com today.
I have left a piece of my heart in Israel and her people. We would like to thank End Time for doing such an awesome job with our Israel tour. We marvel at your team keeping the time schedule, keeping everyone comfortable, the wonderful driver, the brilliant guide, the entire tour program, good hotel choices, and stellar food. We had the privilege to rub shoulders with Pastor Baxter, listen to his current teachings, and had some interesting questions answered so eloquently. He is wonderful. Helene from Australia.
Join Irvin and Judy Baxter May 2nd through the 17th, 2019 for the ultimate Israel tour experience with a Greek island cruise. Go to endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 to sign up today.
Okay, I want to get to the heart of this strife that is seemingly ripping our nation apart. And you know, when you listen to certain talk programs, they'll have maybe some conservatives and some liberals, and you know who's going to argue for what on every issue, because the issues have become so polarized. And many people are attempting to pit whites against blacks or blacks against Hispanics, or there's a lot of different divisions that are taking place. But once they can define a certain issue as a black issue or a white issue or a Hispanic issue, then they like to ride that, because once they can capture a whole ethnic group into one political party, then they know that they've got quite a formidable bloc that will vote for them each election. then on the other hand, the other party's trying to break up that monolithic vote and to say, look, we'll do more for you than they will. All right, but let's get to the very core of the whole thing. What is really going on? Are we really in a battle between socialism and free enterprise? That's certainly something that we're dealing with right now. And I would remind you that there were 3 organizations that were formed 100 years ago, and they were all formed by one man. Now, listen up. The Federal Reserve Act was passed and adopted in 1913. The Brookings Institute was adopted in 1916, and the Council on Foreign Relations was formed in 1921. And there was one man who was the driving force behind all of these things. Now, it's amazing that you would have a foreigner who could exercise such influence. But Mr. Paul Warburg was that one man. He was the one who actually wrote the Federal Reserve Act on a secret meeting on Jekyll Island in 1910. And then it was finally passed into law in 1913. He also was on the board of the Brookings Institute. He also was a trustee with the Council on Foreign Relations. All 3 of these forces have been working to move us toward one world government, and they have adopted the belief that we should have a global governance system. Let me give you an example so that you can sort of decide whether you can believe this or not. Mr. Strobe Talbot wrote an article for Time magazine in July of 1992. It was entitled Birth of the Global Nation. It caught my attention, of course, since I know the Bible prophesies a world government, and when you start writing on the birth of the global nation, well, I'm going to find out what you've got to say. Well, he wrote that article in 92. In 93, he was invited by Bill Clinton to come to the White House and to serve as Deputy Secretary of State for the next 7 years. Well, under his directorship, the International Criminal Court was formed. Bill Clinton made the speech in 1970. Let me make sure I've got my dates right here. 1997, before the United Nations, and 1998, it was adopted, the International Criminal Court. So now then, everybody on earth can be tried before the International Criminal Court without protection of the Bill of Rights or the U.S. Constitution. Now, before you write me off, do your homework. Check out the birth of the International Criminal Court and everything that it means. They actually have warrants out for the arrest of some presidents right now. And the only way they're avoiding arrest is by staying within their particular nations or not going to a nation that's signed on to the International Criminal Court statute. Okay, so then Strobe Talbot, once the Clinton administration was over in the year 2000, Strobe Talbot needed a job. Where did he go? He got a very nice job as president of the Brookings Institute. Now, isn't this interesting? He would write an article, The Birth of the Global Nation, and now he's written a book called The Great Experiment, and he advocates one world government to the maximum in that book. I own it. I've read it. And yet he is head of the Brookings Institute, and he and John Podesta served on the transition team when President Obama came to power after being elected. Here's this man that advocates one world government on the president's transition team. So, does the average American know this? Sorry to say, no. And that's the reason I'm talking to you about it today, because sometimes we think the issues are one thing when truthfully they're another. Okay. So I want to go further because an article appeared some time back, Social Media Companies Ban Conservative Voices. Now, the liberals, it is proven, don't like freedom of speech. This particular article comes from the Washington Times. And I want to share some of it with you to let you know what is going on. I suppose this all really jarred me when a few weeks ago it was announced that Facebook, Google, Apple, and I think Twitter were all banning Alex Jones from being on their media. Well, their argument is, hey, we're private, we can put whoever we want to, but yet they become so dominant. If you're frozen out of that media, you're pretty much a non-entity. So they all announced that come Monday, he's off, banning him because they don't like what he's saying. Now, I couldn't defend everything that Alex Jones says, although he does some good work, and some of the things he said have in fact been factual. Nevertheless, when you have these huge tech, these giant tech firms that pretty much control access to the American public, suddenly they start banning people. But it's not just Alex Jones, because once they do it to one, they can do it to someone else. Now, one reason this stings is because I just found out a few days ago they banned one of our videos. YouTube did, because they didn't like the content. We had a video on World War III coming. We quoted from the Bible that the Bible states, and it does in Revelation chapter 9, verse 13 through 20, that there's a war coming that's going to kill 1/3 of mankind. They thought that was alarmist. Well, the Bible is alarmist sometimes. But our mistake, our sin, was quoting the Bible on their media, and so they banned that particular YouTube program from their media. Now, I just found that out today. I'd like to write them a letter. I'd like to contact them about this to see what their response will be. But I've also found out from our media department that they are shadow banning a lot of things that we put out there because they don't like our message. We're against one world government. They are for one world government. We're against same-sex marriage. They are for same-sex marriage. If you want to get banned from one of these big media organizations, just speak against same-sex marriage. Well, I'm against same-sex marriage because the Bible is against it. The Bible is blatantly against it. And so now what we really have are these huge organizations that are anti-Bible. Now, I've owned Apple computers all my life, and they're tremendous machines. I don't really want anything else, but I'm becoming very disturbed because these big companies are being so overtaken by the liberals. We may have to find some conservative organizations that could compete with some of these companies. All right, but I'm not really here to slam the companies. I'm here to tell you that there are forces in America that don't want conservative voices heard. Let me give you some of this article. The biggest media story of the year broke last week. Now, this was the week before this article was written. Yet millions of Americans never heard the story because the mainstream media shadow banned it. I'm going to tell you what shadow banning is in a little bit. The story was Project Veritas expose of Twitter. Undercover operatives filmed Twitter employees admitting bias against conservatives and revealing what conservatives have known for a long time. Twitter shadow bans conservatives. Here's what shadow banning means. Shadow banning means that a person can still post on Twitter, but no one sees what you say. It's like they just put a muzzle on you. You can go ahead and think you're posting, but then nothing happens. Well, the mainstream media did not cover this story. Project Veritas videos prove what conservatives have claimed for a very long time. Big tech is more than just biased against conservatives. Big tech takes direct action to stop conservative points of view. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I know what I'm talking about. We've suffered from it here at End Time Ministries. And it's not just us. It's any conservative viewpoint. They will shadow ban it and shut it down. Our social media traffic went from 120 million per month down to 60 million when they redesigned their algorithms to weed out certain material. Now, we had no obscene material. All we did was advocate biblical principles, but that's what's going on. Now, accusations of liberal bias in the tech industry are nothing new. Google all but acted as the IT department for the Democrat Party for the last 10 years. Eric Schmidt, chairman of Google's parent company, Alphabet, is a well-known contributor to the Democrat Party, as is Mark Zuckerberg, one of the founders of Facebook. The problem is big tech is trying to kill any other point of view from being heard. Now, here in America, one of our cherished values is freedom of speech. But these huge corporations have maneuvered themselves into such a position of power that they are able, because they claim they're a private company, they are able to pretty much ban freedom of speech because they don't let anything that they don't approve of being come across Facebook, Google, Twitter. That's where we find ourselves today. Now, James Damore was an engineer with Google, and he was fired last August. His crime? He pointed out that men and women are different, and women may not be as attracted to careers in tech as men. Now, you think it's a crime to think men and women are different? I know they're different. I'm married to one, been for 53 years. I'm glad men and women are different. Nevertheless, Damore and another former Google employee are suing the tech giant. In his complaint, Damore alleges and supports with screenshots of internal discussions an environment of hate against anyone who could be considered a conservative. Threats are made against conservatives. Leftists in the Google hierarchy will not only damage their careers at Google, but will make sure that these conservatives don't work in the tech industry at all. While Google was busy making life miserable for conservatives who worked for it, the search engine giant was also busy trying to fight, quote, fake news. As a part of that fight, it announced in its search engine results it would start fact-checking. Now, when you start fact-checking, who determines what's fact and what's not? I mean, free enterprise, freedom of speech means you can put it out there and then people got to decide what is true and what is not for themselves. I mean, you have the freedom to tell a lie. Now, if you're Christian, you don't. But just as far as an American, you have the right to lie. You have the right to say things that are false. I mean, it's done every day from the pulpits of America. There are some pulpits that are preaching false things. I mean, there are major denominations that now ordain homosexuals for their pastors, and the Bible's crystal clear that if a man lies with mankind as with womankind, it is an abomination in the sight of God. So they're putting an abomination up in their pulpit every day. They're lying to their congregations. But they have the freedom to do that, and I don't want them to lose that freedom, because if you can take the freedom away from them, you can take the freedom away from me. So freedom of speech is one of our very cherished freedoms, but now it is under tremendous threat because these big liberal tech industries know they're on the brink of losing the battle for the soul of America. When Donald Trump came along, preaching against globalism and preaching against the establishment, Federal Reserve, Council on Foreign Relations, Brookings Institute. So when he came along, he didn't name them like I am, but that's who he's talking about. When he came along doing that, they didn't take him seriously at first. They didn't think he could possibly topple them. But then he found out he could bypass their controlled media with Twitter and set the discussion for that day. Used to, people read USA Today newspaper to find out what to discuss that day. But now then they read Donald Trump's tweeter of the day to see what's going to be the hot topic. So all of a sudden, he's been able to bypass them and gain control of the nation's conversation. All right. So now here we are. They want to get in the place where they can decide what's fact and what's not. That means the destruction of freedom of speech. Their version of fact-checking means that conservative sites have disclaimers or reviews. For example, the Washington Times is noted as having a political alignment, conservatism in America, while the Washington Post carries no such notice. Neither does the New York Times, even though both papers are famously liberal. Now, I'm telling you some things that you need to know that you may not be reading on Facebook and you may not be reading from Google because they're shadow banning stories like this. Matthew and Jennifer Burke are conservative activists who launched a website in 2016 called excuse me for a moment, but anyway, it goes on to say, based on previous experience, they used Facebook to launch their website. At first, the results were not only excellent, but were consistent with what they experienced in the past. Then right before the 2016 election, the engagement the website generated from Facebook abruptly fell off. According to Jennifer Burke, the page went from performing great to puttering rather rapidly just before and then after the election. I'm talking about performing at 10% of what it had been performing at before. So now all of a sudden they dropped from 100% to 10% because somebody at Facebook made adjustments, shadow banned them. Do we want that in America? That's what's going on right now, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Well, one thing is for sure, as long as we have Bibles, we have freedom to study our Bibles, and that's the source of all truth. And if more Americans would study their Bibles, a lot of these problems would suddenly go away. If you'd like to become a partner with End Time Ministries, the number to call is 1-800-END-TIME. I wish you would if you could. Pray about it. 1-800-363-8463. I hope you can stay with us for the second half hour of our program. We'll be right back.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter, the new book by Irvin's grandson, provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your connection to God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at End Time will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Order this brand new book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
If ever people needed to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for End Time Magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will impact your life. End Time has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that End Time Magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctor's offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and get your subscription today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
We're talking today about freedom of speech, about shadow banning. Shadow banning means that you register on Twitter, but your message doesn't show up anywhere. It's not distributed. They control it. If your message is something they don't want out there, they shadow ban it. And even though they try to deny that this happens, the fact is it has been proven that it happens. Let me give you some examples. Well-known conservative blogger John Hawkins recently announced the demise of his long-running website, rightwingnews.com. In a column in townhall.com, he placed the blame squarely on Facebook and other social media giants and their war on conservatives. Mr. Hawkins noted, we've already lost the schools, Hollywood, and the mainstream media. What happens when you can't get out conservative opinion via social media because they block, shadow ban, and demonetize everyone who gets any traction? What happens if they put rules in place that essentially make expressing conservative opinions something that gets you kicked off their service? Oh, by the way, it's happening. You're pro-gun? Sorry, not allowed. You don't like gay marriage? Get out of here. Criticizing Black Lives Matter? Out of bounds. Perhaps the obvious question is, why isn't the Trump Department of Justice moving to break up the tech giants? Okay, I want to talk about that for a moment, but I want to back up just a minute because I do not want to be misunderstood. When I just mentioned Black Lives Matter, I don't want anyone to think that I am in any way prejudiced against African Americans. I'm the furthest thing from it. I perform marriages, mixed couples, have for many years. I pastored people. But it's the militant rioting of Black Lives Matter, the total twisting of the race issue. Let me speak to both whites and blacks right now, and any other race. Ladies and gentlemen, God loves everybody the same. We should not allow people who, for political reasons or any other reasons, to separate us. I don't believe you can be saved and be prejudiced. The Bible says, if we have respect of persons, we do sin. And God loves all people the same, no matter the color of your skin. I think Martin Luther King said that a man should not be judged by the color of his skin, but the content of his character. What a great statement that is. So I just wanted to make sure that no one could take my words and twist them, because I hate racism in any form. Just wanted to make that real crystal clear. Now, what about, can the Trump administration do anything to stop this? Because, I mean, these people are going for the jugular. They see an election coming up this fall that they are determined to alter. They are determined to swing this nation liberal, because they realize if they get another 2 years of Donald Trump with a Republican House and a Republican Senate, that he may end up getting his wall, and we may end up stopping this illegal immigration, and we may end up stopping this charge toward globalism, and we may actually make America great again, and we may rediscover patriotism. They don't like patriotism because they believe in a one world government. They don't believe in nationalism. Now, I believe America should be good to everybody. I believe that we should all love one another as much as we possibly can. But I do not believe in one world government until Jesus Christ comes to rule it. Okay, so what could happen to reverse all this? In April of 2017, according to net market share, Google had 77.43% of the global search engine market share. The closest competitor was Baidu at 8.43%. So 77% compared to 8%? Is that a monopoly? Yes, it's a monopoly. YouTube dominates the video market, according to Statista.com. In November of 2016, YouTube had 78.8% of the multimedia market. Netflix came in next at 8%, and the closest real alternative to YouTube, Vimeo, came in at 0.8% of the market. Do you see what I'm saying to you? I'm telling you that we have monopoly going on here, and these people are misusing their privileged position. Now, you do know we have monopoly laws here in America just to stop this kind of situation. Because once one organization or one company gets so powerful that they can buy out all the rest, and then they can set their prices wherever they want to, or their practices wherever they want to, that's against American law. We have anti-monopoly laws to break up this kind of a situation. And the question is being asked, why doesn't the Trump administration use the anti-monopoly laws? Well, the truth is, they may have to. So why isn't the Justice Department launching antitrust investigations and litigation against big tech? The free market can only exist with competition, and democracy can only exist when there is a free market of ideas and ideas compete. Liberalism is all about crushing the expression of any idea that disagrees with a liberal political orthodoxy, whatever that orthodoxy is on any given day. If big tech is going to exclude conservative voices, and they are, I've experienced it personally here at End Time Ministries, and ideas from the public square, big tech is now a threat to freedom and liberty. Now, I hate to even address this today, but we're striking at the heart of freedom here. Freedom of speech is one of our most cherished values. Now, for the sake of freedom and liberty, the big tech companies must be broken up. Well, there's a whole lot more out there. If you want to get on the internet and do a search, you can find out all about these things that are going on and what is happening. We're coming to the phones now, and the number to call to be on the air with me, 877-END-TIME. And in all of our discussions, I try to keep them Christian. And even though I've been speaking against these big tech companies for what they're doing, all I want them to do is to quit doing it. I'm not here to sow poison. I mean, I use Google. I use YouTube. I own Apple computers. So I'm not against these companies. But when I see a threat to the very foundation of America, it does concern me. So I'm taking your calls right now. The number to call to be on the air with me, 877-END-TIME. That's 877-363-8463. And we need to understand this, not in a poisonous way, not in a hateful way. That's not what we want to do. You know, we have these hate crimes. We should never have allowed hate crime legislation. We should never allow that. Because if you kill somebody, that's a crime. If you rob a bank, that's a crime. But when you start trying to decide what a person was thinking or what their beliefs are, and you're going to up the sentence because of their beliefs, now you've moved into thought control. You've moved into communism when you do that. We ought to get rid of every hate crime legislation we have. Keep the laws against crimes, punish the crimes, but quit trying to get inside people's minds and decide what they should believe, what they should not believe. If they've ever made any kind of a hateful comment on their internet, on their personal pages, then we like to go out after them for an extra 10 years in prison. It's all because the socialists want to control speech. They want to control thought. Read 1984, George Orwell. He talked about thought crimes. The government watched everybody to make sure they were thinking right. All right, we're going to the phones now. First of all, Stacy's calling from South Dakota. Hello, Stacy.
Hello, Mr. Baxter. Can you hear me?
I hear you well.
I'm glad you're talking about this subject today. There's a lot of stuff on social media and on Facebook that has been deleted from my page. I didn't understand or didn't know that it was called shadow banning. And I went to go back to delete it. It's just amongst my friends that I've shared. But I've gone back to delete it, and it said it's already been removed. And I thought, well, why was it still up on my page if it had already been removed? And now I know the term, shadow banning.
Pretty shocking, isn't it, Stacy?
Well, it's annoying, but I knew something was going on because my friends and my family, even in different cities, when they go to look me up on Facebook, they can't find me. And, yeah, there's a lot of Stacys out there with my last name. But no, there's only specific Stacys in certain places, and they know my picture, so I'm not hiding my face. But it is very, very interesting what Facebook, and I personally have experienced it, and I've snipped, I've taken proofs of what has happened, and the proofs of my posts being deleted. So yeah, it is censorship. It's definitely happening, and I don't like big government, but if we, see, in South Dakota, John Thune was one of the first people in Congress to address Mr. Zuckerberg with what's going on with Facebook, and I thought I was so proud of him to take that stance and be the first one to speak and talk to him about it. But I think Facebook has just had a slap on the hands, and really nothing has been done. But to me, it is a monopoly. But if they want to just work and have their business model as liberal, well then fine. Then the conservatives, don't have to be part of it. But when they're opening it up to free market and everybody, they shouldn't be banning or deleting posts or having that censorship. So I was thinking with what you do is so important that you should just write another book. And then you can be on the list, on the bestsellers list. And you can bypass Facebook. You can bypass social media.
Well, all those are good ideas, Stacy. And have you, by any chance, written to Facebook about this?
Yes, I snipped something that was deleted, and I sent it to him and said, well, why are you deleting my posts but leaving them for me and for my friends, supposedly? You're still putting it up like I'm sharing it amongst my friends, when really they didn't even see it. So why? But they never replied back to me because I either got them in their game or... Well, we probably, I don't know.
Well, Stacey,
really
they'll ignore you as long as they can. But if they could get 1 million complaints per day, they might have a hard time ignoring that. So everybody needs to write. Hey, I've run out of time in this segment, Stacey, so I'm going to let you go. But thank you very much. We do have one segment left. We'll be getting right back to you. If you're on hold, stay right there where you are, because this is a serious thing for our nation right now. God give us freedom. In this time.
If ever people needed to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for End Time Magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will impact your life. End Time has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that End Time Magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctors' offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and get your subscription today.
Before I come back to the phones, let me give you just a little bit more information. This article was entitled, David Horowitz, Visa MasterCard cut off payments to my think tank based on SPLC hate group label. The David Horowitz Freedom Center has had their donation processing system blocked by Visa and MasterCard, allegedly following a campaign by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Visa has since contacted Breitbart News to deny involvement in the blacklisting of the Freedom Center. The David Horowitz Freedom Center stated in a recent email that its ability to accept donations by credit card has been disabled by both Visa and MasterCard following a campaign by the SPLC to label the Freedom Center as a hate group. This situation comes shortly after Robert Spencer of Jihad Watch was forced off the funding program Patreon following pressure from MasterCard. So now we've got MasterCard, we got Visa. I mean, we got these huge firms that are trying to control everything. It's really alarming. And we need to pray about it, and we also need to do everything that we can do about it. There's a whole lot more. And oh, by the way, one more paragraph. We have been attacked by the left-wing hate machine whose goal is to suppress and silence conservative voices. This is the work of Soros-funded Media Matters and Southern Poverty Law Center operation. It's cynical, calculated, and supported by the Democratic Party. The reason MasterCard and Visa gave us for cutting us off and thus sabotaging our online fundraising operation is that SPLC, and again, that is the Southern Poverty Law Center operation, told them that we were a hate group. So they took them off. Wow. I saw a list of people, I don't know whether it was this same SPLC that did it or not, but End Time's name was on a hate group. We try not to be hateful toward anyone. We do speak what the Bible says. I suppose that's what got us there. Anytime you speak against same-sex marriage, that's like waving a red flag in front of a bull to them. All right, getting back to the phones now. Let's go to Pat from Arkansas, or is Alaska. Pat from Alaska. Hello, Pat.
Yes, please. It's Pat in Alaska. Thank you, Pastor, for taking this call, and thank you for End Time and all the staff and crew and Pastor Dave Robbins. I appreciate hearing all of these things that, even though I'm a lifelong Christian, I'll be a baby Christian until I see the Lord, because there's so much I don't understand. I'm a listener on a daily basis.
Well, thank you.
Sir, I wanted to ask the question, please. Can Christians be or have confidence that Mr. Trump is actually being used by the Lord, since he doesn't present as a Christian in any way that I can really identify? As an example, he forgives no one. He takes the bait at every turn, even though he knows he's baited. He behaves like, well, I'm not a psychologist, but the behavior is sort of like maybe a child who was bullied when they were small, and now everything's an insult, everything's an imaginary attack, and so he counterattacks as soon as he hears any negative aspects about him. Supposedly he said on to some news agency that if the Republicans don't win, there's going to be violence. Now, already, isn't that like inciting and inviting violence before it even happens? He scares me.
Well, the fact is, if you look at who's generating the violence in America right now, it's not the conservative side. All the violence we've had, burning down colleges and having riots, it's all coming from the liberal side right now. Now, I'm not here to take a position, Republican or Democrat, but as far as President Trump goes, to me, I support him as long as he acts in harmony with the Bible. Now, his speech, he does not have Christian speech. He uses a lot of language that a Christian should not use, and yet he's being used of God in wonderful ways. Moving the embassy to Jerusalem was perfectly in harmony with God. I believe God loved it, smiled upon it. And he's being used to strengthen America and to get us out of the one world governmental system. I absolutely know it's prophesied in the Bible that America was supposed to not be in the one world government system. He is pulling us out. So however you want to attribute this, whether it's God's influence over him in spite of his faults or whatever the reason is, he is definitely doing a lot of things pleasing to God right now. And as long as he does that, I'm very thankful about that. But I do pray for him every day for the very reasons that you mentioned, Pat, that God will continue to minister to him and possibly bring him into a full walk with Jesus Christ as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for your answer to that question. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank
God
you,
bless.
Pat. And I believe me, I've had all those same questions in my mind, but I'm really thankful for how God is using President Trump, and he is. I mean, lining straight up with Bible prophecy. We're not supposed to be a part of the world government. We are supposed to defend Israel against the world government, and we're doing all of the above. And so we're very grateful. I don't know where all these policies are coming from. If they're coming from President Trump, thank God for him. If they're coming from someone who's around President Trump that is influencing him, thank God for that. Whatever's happening, my faith is not in President Trump. My faith is in Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And my faith is not in any man, it's in Jesus Christ. At the same time, I believe in giving credit to where credit is due. And so far, President Trump has done many things very pleasing in the eyes of God and in line with the scriptures. So as long as he does that, then he would have my support. All right back to the phones now. And let's go to Richard from Washington. Hello, Richard.
Hey, God bless Irvin Baxter. How you doing? I love your show. And the question I have for you today, real quickly, two questions, and we'll see if you can answer them real quick. So let me get to the point. What do you think about Alex Jones being banned from Twitter and Facebook, since you were talking on the subject of banning and free speech? And also, was America's foundation based on masonry? A lot of things I've been studying about the founders of the country, George Washington and other parties, other political people that were Benjamin Franklin, they were Masons. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, as far as Alex Jones being banned, if they can ban him, they can ban you and me. And so once they start down that slippery slope, we just simply don't want to go there. And Alex Jones, yes, he's a rebel rouser to a degree, but he's very much against the one world government. He says a lot of things that are true. There are times, I think, that he swings way too far and sometimes does not properly document some of the things he's saying, and that causes him to be somewhat discredited. But he still has the right to say it because we have freedom of speech in this country. There's a lot of news that's out there on the mainstream media sources that ends up not being true. I listened to a news report not too long ago, and I knew what they were saying was not true. And I'm just sitting there listening in wonderment that a major media outlet would put things out there that's not true. So I definitely do not believe we should interfere with freedom of speech in any way, shape, or form, unless it's lewd, unless it is advocating toward violence or whatever. But as far as freedom of speech, anytime we abridge freedom of speech, it needs to have a very high bar of proof that should be banned, because it's terribly dangerous when we start doing that. Now, as far as the Muslim influence on our nation, not the Muslim influence, but the help me out here a little bit. The other point that you had there, the Masons. Masonic influence. Masons have a lot of influence in this country. Other big organizations have a lot of influence in this country. Whether it's Council on Foreign Relations, Federal Reserve, Brookings Institute, the Masons, Roman Catholicism has a huge amount of influence. Out of 9 representatives on the U.S. Supreme Court, there was, until recently, 6 out of 9 of them were Roman Catholic. To me, that's not a balanced situation. And many of them may make good judgments. I'm not here to speak directly against that, but I'm just saying anytime you have too much power in the hands of one organization or one people, it can become somewhat threatening. So that's all I'm saying about that. I am not an expert on the Masons. I've studied quite a bit about it, and I know that there is some power there, but do they have the power to rule the world? No, I don't think they do right now. But there's a lot of organizations that feel like they're right and they should have the power to rule the world. They just don't. And I'm not saying that's true about the Masons. I'm just trying to respond to your question.
Yeah, that's kind of where what I'm trying to get at is there a perversion of the gospel through Masons? Masons, they accept all the faith, and sometimes it can look like a form of Christ, but it's not. And so that's where I'm concerned, is that maybe we're not looking at the clues here, because when they say in God we trust, well, what God do we trust? It's on the dollar bill. As we know, the root of that is back to Babylonian mysticism, Egypt.
Yeah, when you talk about Masonry, then you got to really get into it to understand it. You got to see what they believe about Lucifer. Do they believe that Lucifer is evil, or do they believe that he's really the light giver? And from what I've read, they do believe that he's the light giver. And so there's quite a distortion that takes place once you get into that. I personally do not favor secret societies. I think anytime you have to take certain oaths and pledges that are outside of Jesus Christ, it's something a person should not do. Listen, Richard, I'll let you go. Let me see if I can get to at least one more caller here. Thank you very much. Let's go to Pat from right here in Texas. Hello, Pat.
Hi, I've been hearing everything you're saying, and I agree with you about the Supreme Court. We don't need 5 on there. We have 2 of them we can't count on so far, Catholics, even, So as far as what they should vote for. But also, I'm seeing the problem that Google is giving Ted Cruz here in Texas. Anytime you go to him, you'll get his opponent all over the place. I mean, you can't hardly get rid of the commercials. I mean, it's incredible. So I go to Start Page. That uses Google, but you get more Christian things from Start Page. Okay. And then if I want to go to YouTube, I go to YouTube and I put in things like Ted Cruz quizzes Zuckerberg. Well, that is a very good scene. And you know why Zuckerberg don't want Ted Cruz or probably Senator Cornyn let us learn anything about him. So I'm asking people to do it yourself. He is too polite to tell all the things he's done. And unfortunately, we need to know. And maybe you could ask him, would you please tell us all the things you've done, like winning 8 Supreme Court cases, including the 10 Commandments on our courthouse lawn in Austin. We have them. Other states lost them. I watched him a long time, and, and Obamacare, they said, everybody needs a place on the plane. And he filibustered all those hours. He said, but you're putting them in the baggage compartment.
Pat, I'm totally out of time. I'm sorry to have to cut you off. You're saying a lot of good things. I thank you. And let me conclude by saying this to all of you out there. I don't want to speak unkindly of anyone. There are, until the last Supreme Court judge passed on, there were 6 Catholics, there were 3 Jews. I love the Jewish people. I love the Catholic people. I do not mean to speak against them. However, we do need to realize that every person carries their convictions with them, and that will have an influence. Well, our time's come and gone. We'll be back here tomorrow. God bless you all, and we'll see you then.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of End Time Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with End Time Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.